Honorable Jason Isaac is the founder and CEO of the American Energy Institute. He's a recognized voice in the energy policy landscape. He's appeared on Fox News, Fox Business, CNN, and other national news programs. His commentaries have been featured in prominent outlets: Fox News, Fox Business, The Hill, Washington Examiner, Daily Caller, and more. And I say the Honorable because Jason served 4 terms as the state representative for Hays and Blanco counties in the Texas Hill Country. He's fought for common sense energy, election integrity, limited government, the Second Amendment, and property rights. He's proudly self-proclaimed as the Carbon King for leading a high-carbon lifestyle. Welcome, Jason, back to the Economic War Room.
It's great to be on.
You know, it's nice having you in studio.
Yes,
We've had you on the program before. And now your wife, she's got your seat in the Texas House, right?
That's right, yes. Some of the same geography, they had redistricting, and she picked up Comal County, where New Braunfels is, and Canyon Lake, and a beautiful area of the Hill Country.
Well, the Hill Country, Texas is the best part of Texas. It is beautiful. We have our own little hills here at Liberty Hawk, but she's a great lady, and I'm proud to say she was a co-sponsor of HB 1056, our transactional gold and silver, our pirate money legislation, and we're celebrating that the governor recently signed it into law.
Yeah, congratulations on that. A huge victory, something I know she's been advocating for years now, probably since meeting you and hearing you over the last few years. She's just in term now for her second term in office, and so glad to see that get across the finish line. Economic prosperity, freedom, liberty, protecting our private property rights. That's, in my opinion, what the bill is a lot about.
When I hear the word freedom, I'm thinking of Mel Gibson, you know, in Braveheart.
Yes.
And that's what we're fighting for. And I want to talk about some of those things today because we've got globalist accords limiting American energy, which is a threat to our freedom, leftist states hijacking our energy policies, and this whole broad ESG idea and how we need to know how to fix this. But let's start with your Substack post. It says, American energy is still being held hostage by Paris. How is Paris holding us hostage?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this is a piece that was published in The Hill. I wanted people in D.C. to see this, and it's great to be a contributing editor, a contributor to The Hill. They published this piece, but really talking about how American energy is held hostage by Paris. And I'm talking about the Paris Climate Accords, something that President Trump has called a scam, something that's being used to weaponize against the best interest of American economic prosperity and environmental leadership. The Paris Accords tell countries that agree to sign them, you'll be net zero by 2050. That doesn't do anything to mitigate a changing climate. It's about centralizing control. This is a World Economic Forum, UN agenda, globalist agenda to separate us from our money and our freedom and our private property.
Well, net zero is ridiculous anyway, the whole notion of it.
Yes.
But then to force us to do it, but I thought President Trump took us out of it.
So this is the second time he's taken us out. So this is not the law of the land in the United States, but yet you have companies, and this was meant for countries, but yet companies have been they've been coerced to bend the knee to sign on to and make commitments that align with the Paris Accords. You look at almost every single multinational oil and gas company, and I represent a trade organization that represents American energy companies, primarily oil, gas, coal, and nuclear. Not a single one of my members has signed on and made commitments to the Paris Accords. They don't embrace ESG or DEI. We're for free markets. Get rid of the subsidies. But you see a lot of the multinational global oil and gas companies, every single investor-owned utility in the United States have commitments to the Paris Accord. They're going to agree and make commitments to be net zero by, some of them as early as 2035, impossible. Others out to 2050, still impossible. But then what they're doing is they're moving their capital in that direction. With the case of utility companies, they're early retiring coal-fired power plants, leaving those stranded assets, passing the cost on to ratepayers. One of the reasons why our electricity costs are going up 25% over the last few years here in the United States. It's over 28% over the last 4 years in Texas alone in the ERCOT grid. So costs are increasing, and what we're getting in return is less reliable electricity. And this is because of the Paris Accords and the commitments that these companies have made. So these companies need to eliminate their commitments, align with an American energy dominance agenda. Those commitments don't do anything. And they should have asked, what does it do if we reach net zero? You know, what's the justification? Which Interesting. The Heritage Foundation has basically the model on their websites. You can go in and plug in different scenarios. But the one that's important is that the U.S. meets net zero by 2050, according to the models that the UN has used to justify Paris. If the U.S. reaches net zero by 2050, it's net zero CO2 emissions, then by 2100, the temperature differential is less than 1/10 of 1 degree cooler.
So somebody's making money.
So
from
$50 trillion the U.S. spends to get to net zero, and it does nothing. We're seeing more and more research coming out from paleoclimatologists, from great Norwegian study that came out that shows that man's contributions of greenhouse gas emissions are not having any impact on the climate.
Yeah,
there's just the correlation may be there, and there's really no correlation there. So it's absurd in itself.
Right. Climate scientists, I get, they're getting paid this. You get a grant, but there's not $50 trillion worth of grants. Somebody else is making money from this. Who wins?
Well, yeah, probably a group that we know well, State Armor, is showing that China is winning. China is dumping millions of dollars into institutions of higher education here in the United States. They're dumping millions of dollars into think tanks to publish research that align with their agenda that is separated. The energy transition is happening, and unfortunately, the energy transitioning is happening where it's transitioning our energy production, the most responsible production in the world here in the United States, to China, to Iran, to Saudi Arabia, to other places that don't care about human rights or the environmental protections. This is all part of the plan that's been going on for decades now, is we are subsidizing communism here in the United States, and China is laughing all the way to the bank as they build 1 to 2 new coal-fired power plants every single week, something we should be doing, as they build over 100 nuclear power plants, something we should be doing. We've got 3 on the books to build in the future. China is planning 100 nuclear power plants to generate affordable and reliable electricity so they can continue their manufacturing and industrial dominance.
So they've got us subsidizing their economy through these accords. They've got us literally taking us offline from electricity standpoint, which means that we're going to be behind in the AI race because AI is going to require enormous amounts of electricity. They have us literally putting ourselves in a subjected position to their companies, their industry, and so forth. This is a big scam. It hurts the American consumer now, but it is also a national security threat.
It is significantly. You look at what happens in Germany. Germany is deindustrializing before our eyes. They're shutting down BASF, leading chemical manufacturing company, closing operations, citing high energy costs because of their Green New scam. That production is moving to China. China is, for the first time, is exporting energy, diesel, jet fuel, home heating oil. They've never been an exporter of energy, and they are now because we've shown weakness in the EU, and it's happening here in the United States.
All right, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about this globalist threat. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
I'm outside Babes, which I'm told is the quintessential chicken restaurant here in Roanoke, Texas. Let's go and see if we can buy the food in here, chicken with gold.
This is gonna be the fried chicken.
This is unbelievable. How am I going to fit all this in? I seriously actually don't know how to begin with this. This is so overwhelming. Do you think I can pay with gold?
I don't know. You may have to ask the cashier. I don't handle it.
Can I pay with gold? But actually, you said I could pay with this? Okay, I'm gonna pay with this, but I'm gonna pay with gold. So look at the price of gold going up. That's pretty cool, yeah? Right, this is Babes, yeah? How much gold did I pay? Gold. How many grams?
0.26.
0.26. Quarter of a gram of gold. How about that?
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah. Success! Bought with gold, paid with glint.
We're talking with energy expert Jason Isaac, who has looked at the big picture, the national security picture, the economic picture. You know, there are direct impacts to your economic well-being, your family, and your future, as well as America's future, from our energy policy. We have President Trump, who took us out of the Paris Climate Accords, and yet companies are keeping us in. Why? Globalism, the United Nations, right, Jason? World Health Organization, everything. They have a direct impact on our lives. They shouldn't, but they do. What do we do to protect ourselves?
Well, we've got to recognize the threat and who's actually causing the threat. We have these global financial institutions, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They've recently pulled out of some of their climate cartel alliances, the Climate Action 100 Plus, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. That's a Michael Bloomberg founded and funded organization. They've pulled out of those cartels, which by joining them, they swore that they would exercise votes and their assets under management to align with a decarbonization agenda, a political agenda.
Why is decarbonization bad? Let's go with that. Because if people say, oh, I want to reduce my carbon footprint.
Yeah.
You on the opposite, I want to increase my...
I testify in front of Congress and say, I'm Jason Isaac, and I live a high carbon lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think the rest of the world should too. There are no low energy rich countries. They don't exist. But those that do have a high carbon per capita emissions, they're the wealthiest places on the planet. They have the cleanest air and the cleanest water. Those things go hand in hand, that economic prosperity and environmental leadership. And there is the CO2 emissions narrative that it's causing this climate catastrophe is so far from true. More science is coming out that's showing that man's contributions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere are having no impact on temperature. But even if you assume that it is, use the UN models that says if we decarbonize, I mean, they cook the books to show this, it doesn't do anything to mitigate a changing climate. It just makes everything more expensive. And that's really what it's about. It's about control. They're trying to centralize the World Economic Forum, the UN, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank. All these globalist organizations are driving this narrative to reach net zero. And all it is this great transfer of wealth from the United States, from the EU to China, to our detriment. China doesn't care about human rights. They don't care about environmental protection. But that's the real threat of a political agenda. And decarbonization doesn't do anything. It is a political agenda. I encourage people to live the high carbon lifestyle and hope that others get to do the same. Because wouldn't it be great if people in Africa, there's 3 billion people on the planet that don't have access to the same amount of electricity that you and I have that powers our refrigerator. They don't have access to that much electricity, something that we take for granted here in the United States. So there are billions of people on the planet that could be lifted out of poverty. Today, women will spend over 200 million hours walking to collect water because they don't have access to affordable and reliable energy. And I tell people all throughout the United States, we stand over the key to ending that poverty right here in the United States, right here on this property. There are oil and gas and coal reserves below our feet that we produce more responsibly than anywhere else. And that is the key to ending poverty on the planet. And isn't that a noble cause? Shouldn't we be doing that? That's my goal. I work every day to work to end poverty around the world, and that's how you do it, with access to affordable and reliable energy. So this globalist threat to decarbonization does absolutely the opposite. We've seen a perfect example in Sri Lanka. They had a president that got elected in 2019. He said he was the first ever net zero candidate on the face of the earth. He got elected and began implementing policies to align. They had the highest ESG rating of any country on the planet, which I think is funny. But they began these net zero policies. First, we're going to ban the use and importation of nitrogen-based fertilizers that come from natural gas that help with food production.
I guess starve their populations.
And that's what they were exporting tea and rice prior to his election. Food production went down 40%. Food costs went up 80%. By the end of he didn't finish his 3-year term. He was run out of his palace. Happened during the COVID lockdowns. People overran his palace, and he left on a jet-fueled marine or military vehicle. He didn't go to Malawi or Ethiopia, places that are truly living at net zero. where they'll have 20-year less lifespans than us here in the United States. He went to the highest carbon emission place in the world, Singapore. Beautiful, clean, it's great. But he should have been relegated to Malawi. But he fled to the high carbon lifestyle, even though he relegated his people to live this low carbon, paltry lifestyle where they're starving. 9 in 10 families in Sri Lanka are facing hunger on a daily basis because of his policies when they were experiencing what was becoming prosperity for them for the first time in their existence, and that was completely erased with a political agenda.
Well, we're watching similar things. You're talking about a competition there between high carbon nations and low carbon nations. We're watching similar things happen here in the United States. And I want to transition to the article you wrote about Governor Newsom in California, who's losing population, and we're sitting in Texas gaining population. Our economy is growing robustly. Contrast those differences.
Yeah, it really is. You look at what's happening in Texas and Florida, places that are embracing affordable and reliable energy. Not all of the above. I love that Secretary of Energy Chris Wright recently said he's never been for all of the above if it increases the cost of energy. He's for affordable and reliable energy, things that work when we need them to work. And states that are embracing those policies are experiencing economic prosperity. It's where manufacturing goes, where industry goes, counter to what they're experiencing in the United Kingdom. Just recently, within the last several days, the United Kingdom has announced they're cutting their carbon taxes on their utility bills because people can't afford their utility bills. Imagine that. They've implemented these policies that have depended on more so-called green energy, wind, solar, batteries, that are extremely more expensive, and their utility bills are going up. And so then they start taxing them to help pay for this green scam. And so now they're having to cut those taxes. I'm sure there's a bunch of people in arm slings, politicians in the UK, because they've been patting themselves on the back like, oh, we just cut your carbon tax. That doesn't do anything but make us poor. And that's what's happening in the United Kingdom, deindustrialization, and it's happening in California. It happens anywhere you have high energy costs. It happens anywhere you get away from affordable, reliable coal, which is a great baseload electric generation source. Especially here in the United States, anywhere we've seen places go away from coal, costs have gone up, and then industry leaves right after that.
Well, that's California versus the rest of the states. And what starts in California doesn't always stay in California. Here's another one, and we're going to probably have to cover this after the break. But Democrats in the state legislature have introduced a first of its kind law that allows individuals and insurers harmed by climate change to sue energy companies over misinformation. This is coming from Hawaii, and it's threatening all states here in the United States. I want you to comment on that briefly, and then we'll cover more after the break.
Yeah, I look forward to coming back to this one. This is a big deal. There's a climate lawfare. There's actually a hearing in the Senate. Senator Cruz is calling people before his committee to testify on this climate nuisance lawsuit abuse and how it's just ruining our judicial system, all in the effort to implement the Green New Scam via lawsuit.
All right, we'll cover this and we'll talk about sue and settle and how we fix it when we come back right after this break.
I'm Kevin Sorbo. When you spend money, you consider who you're buying from and the causes they support. If you don't, then you're likely supporting companies that are trying to destroy our country and take away our freedoms. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a cell phone company and a good one. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks along with 100% US-based customer support. But here's the deal. Patriot Mobile's mission has nothing to do with cell phones. They carry out their mission by giving back millions of dollars every year to Christian conservative causes that are actively engaged in the fight to save America. Voting is no longer enough to beat the woke. We have to band together, support like-minded companies, and vote with our dollars. That's how we win. Stop supporting companies that want to destroy America and join Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
Gold holds its value far better than the US dollar. Let's see what happens when I go in this sweet shop and pay with gold. Can I pay with gold?
I mean, you can wait, find out how much it costs.
Do you know what? Basically, do you know why I'm even using gold?
I do not.
It holds its value over time, but it's a bit difficult to spend, isn't it? Do you take this?
Yes.
That's MasterCard. Yeah, but I'm actually going to pay with gold, believe it or not, using this. That's my MasterCard, and it's linked to my gold wallet. So let's just watch that. Authorizing. Yeah, add a tip.
Thank you.
So this is your store?
Yes, sir.
And how much gold did I pay?
0.2243 grams.
Yeah, success. Bought with gold, paid with glitz.
Jason, right before the break, we were talking about a law that's passed in Hawaii that allows nuisance lawsuits of a sort that could literally backdoor bring Paris Climate Accords and so forth by claiming misinformation. And that's just one of many lawfare attacks on our energy industry. Talk more.
Yeah, Vermont has also passed a law. I believe New York has passed a law that's going to essentially tax oil and gas companies for impacts that they've had on the weather. I mean, the absolute absurdity, but then you get into the climate lawfare racket that's happening. There's a group in Washington, D.C. called the Environmental Law Institute, and in 2018, they created this thing called the Climate Judiciary Project. The CJP, the Climate Judiciary Project, has been going around the U.S. since 2018, and I say tainting judges. To date, they've trained over 2,000 judges at the federal and the state level on how to rule on these climate cases. It's really what it is. They're getting to the referees before the game has even started, and they're telling the referees how the game's going to go. To date, 10 climate nuisance lawsuits by cities and municipalities around the country have been completely dismissed. A few weeks ago, I sent a letter to the governor of Puerto Rico and asked her to withdraw Puerto Rico's climate nuisance lawsuit against Exxon, American Petroleum Institute. And granted, these are companies that are aligned with the Paris Accords and institutions that I just completely disagree with them aligning with a political agenda, but yet sent this letter. A week later, the governor, she responded and withdrew their nuisance lawsuit. They're partnering with a firm in San Francisco called Scher Edling. This is the law firm that handles a vast majority of these climate nuisance lawsuits. So they're going into municipalities and saying, we'll provide attorneys, we will handle the lawsuit, but we just need to do it on behalf of Honolulu, on behalf of Hoboken, New Jersey, on behalf of Baltimore. So they go in and they say, we'll do this for free. We want to sue these companies. And if we get a settlement, of course, you're going to get a portion of the proceeds, but we're going to take, our cut as well. That's the pitch. And then these law firms, the Scher Edling law firm works with the Climate Judiciary Project. Some of the modules of the Climate Judiciary Project are using, they've got 13 different climate science modules. They've been debunked by left-leaning organizations like Snopes, saying that this guy can't tell where the emissions from the 1800s are impacting the weather in Hawaii today and what company those emissions came from, but that's the information that they're teaching judges. Completely disqualifying judges. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Hawaii has refused to recuse himself, even though he's attended Climate Judiciary Project events, endorsed their work, and participated in some of their conferences. He is completely biased in this and needs to recuse himself, but he refuses to do that, and he's pushing ahead. So what's interesting to note, though, in their climate lawsuit, they're not suing the only refinery on the island of Hawaii, in the state of Hawaii. They're not suing the only refinery that's there because it just happens to be the refinery contributes significantly to the Democrats in elected office in the state of Hawaii. They're going after companies that don't have operations in the state of Hawaii. May sell their products in Hawaii, but it's just the hypocrisy knows no bounds. But this is a real threat. That's why Senator Cruz and his committee are having a hearing to talk about this very topic and get to the bottom of it to try to stop these climate nuisance lawsuits. Again, 10 cases dismissed already because they're absurd and one withdrawn out of Puerto Rico.
Well, I know on the ESG front, you and many of your colleagues have effectively brought shareholder actions and pushed companies, hey, who's suing on my behalf? Who's saying my energy bill's too high? Who's suing for the people who lost their lives because we didn't have reliable energy in the Snowmageddon incident here in Texas? We need to stand up and fight fire with fire in some cases. I applaud Senator Cruz for what he's doing, but you're doing things far beyond that. Talk about some of your programs.
Fighting for the consumer. And it's great to represent a trade organization of American energy companies that are okay with me going before Congress and legislatures around the country to advocate for policies that reduce the cost of energy. There is not another trade organization out there that wants to lower the cost of a barrel of oil, that wants to reduce the cost of energy to the consumers. They don't make as much money when you do that. But my members understand the benefits for mankind, understand the role that energy plays in human flourishing around the globe, and there are so many opportunities out there to lift people out of poverty. So I'm truly blessed to get to work for an organization and a board that embraces free market principles and understands that energy is the key to human flourishing. But you still see companies out there that are embracing these policies, that are virtue signaling that they're buying carbon-free electricity. And this is what's really crushing us here in Texas. We don't have anyone fighting for the consumers except for, there's very few of us that are truly fighting for the consumers in the state legislature. And we came up against a massive behemoth this last legislative session when it came to grid reliability, something we've been working on, I've been working on with another coalition before Winter Storm Uri happened. We knew it was going to happen. We didn't know that we knew that we didn't have enough affordable, reliable thermal generation from natural gas, coal, and nuclear. That at the time of that Winter Storm Uri, 33% of our grid was variable. I call them unreliables. Now it's 47% of our grid. So we continue to see costs go up. We continue to see the reliability come down. And we just want to say, if you want to be on the grid, you need to have a reliability standard. You need to be able to provide electricity for a given amount of time when we need it the most, not when the weather's cooperating. And it comes to find out that the big oil, big tech, big manufacturing, the heavy industrial users were the ones that were fighting us because to meet their Paris agreements, they've gone out and they've signed these power purchase agreements. They buy electricity in bulk, they pay a set fee for it, they're buying it from renewable companies like Electric de France, a company that has a significant number of wind turbines in the state of Texas, that is owned and controlled by the French government. We're subsidizing socialism. But they can virtue signal these purchasers that they're buying carbon-free electricity. They're still connected to the grid, and so when there's reliability costs, it's the residential ratepayers and the small businesses that don't have that power of the purse to do these power purchase agreements that are paying the higher cost. The Texas Public Policy Foundation estimated it's over $2.3 billion alone last year that are being spread around to those residential ratepayers and small businesses. And the reason they were fighting us on the policy, because there's pass-through provisions in their contract that says if any policy changes, then the contracts get renegotiated, and they didn't want to pay higher costs for reliability. They're fine with you and I picking up their tab. So we're not only subsidizing them with these crazy production tax credits, we're subsidizing them by paying for reliability costs that they impose on the grid. And it's really unfortunate for the least among us.
Thank you for standing up for Texans and Americans. How can people follow your work, and how can they support you?
Yeah, you can go to AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. You can support us there. If you're an energy company that wants to join our trade organization, we would love to have members that support free markets. I'm grateful for Liberty Energy joining right after the election. Chris Wright, their former CEO, just fantastic. Again, AmericanEnergyInstitute.com, or you can find me on X at Isaac for Energy.
All right, we're going to summarize all this in our free economic battle plan. You can get a copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.